full council. We'll start with agenda item 1, which is welcome and safety information. Welcome to today's extraordinary full council meeting. This meeting has been called by a requisition of 5 or more councillors with a motion to be debated. Welcome also to members of the public who are watching this meeting via our YouTube channel. Please be mindful of the etiquette guidance that has been issued, which will ensure you can be viewed and understood by members of the public watching at home. May I please remind everyone to behave with due courtesy, tolerance and respect for everyone's views and conduct themselves in a reasonable way. There will be one method of voting at this meeting. For the votes, a named vote will take place by way of a roll call. I will run through this procedure for that when we get to the vote. Now we will move to the agenda. Sorry, beg your pardon. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillor English. Do we have any other apologies for absence?
Councillor Nicola Bowden-Jones, Lord Mayor. Sorry, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Right, and Lord Mayor, can I pass on apologies from Sultan Khan as well?
Thank you very much. And I think we need to pass on our congratulations to Councillor Khan and his family. I believe they had a baby boy yesterday, so that's lovely. So I think that's a very good excuse for not attending this evening. Do we have apologies from anybody else? Thank you very much. I'd now like to move on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Can I please ask whether any councillors have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? Councillor Stevens.
I have my usual pecuniary interest to declare, which is that I have written a book about local government, and it actually includes WECA in it too.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any other declarations of interest before we move on? No, thank you very much indeed. We will now move to agenda item 4, which is the public forum. At this extraordinary meeting, we will hear first from members of the public and then also from councillors. We are allowing 1 hour for this item. Details of the statements and questions received have been published on our website. Members of the public who have registered to speak are currently watching on YouTube and in the waiting room for this meeting. I will outline the following for them. You will be permitted to enter the meeting from the waiting room and you will be on mute initially. You may be in the waiting room a little while before your turn, so please be patient. I will call out your name, at which point you can unmute yourself. If there are any technical issues or problems admitting people to the meeting, we will move on to the next person and return afterwards. So please bear with us. When the exchange has finished, you will leave the meeting and the next person will be called. If you have further public forum, you will remain and are asked to remain on mute. In the event of any disruption, I will give 2 warnings before that person is removed from the meeting so that the meeting can continue. Firstly, public petitions. There are no petitions submitted to full council under public forum. Next, the public statements from members of the public. There were a total of 10 public statements received. A list of them will be displayed on your screen. Thank you. 4 members of public have indicated that they wish to speak to their statements. They are indicated on the list and we will run through them in order. I will then invite you to speak to your statement for 1 minute. Please do summarise and please bear in mind that all statements were sent to councillors in advance of the meeting. We first move to PS05. Councillor Hugh James. Councillor James.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Here goes. Thank you for allowing me to speak here today and for councillors for calling this extraordinary meeting. We need local authority leaders to come together to put forward a plan that involves North Somerset within WECA and a strong deal for the whole of the West of England, including Bristol. Please show some immediacy and action in doing this. North Somerset is prosperous, proud, and at times stubborn, but we have major inequalities here too. We have health inequalities, highest proportion of residents working full-time below real living wage, and we're a coastal community, disproportionate risk from not overcoming the climate emergency. Employment and skills here will be disproportionately impacted by North Somerset not being able to join the combined authority. We'll miss out opportunities provided by Future Bright, innovation funding and developed adult education funding. Young North Somerset residents are incredibly mobile and a considerable migrant population to Bristol. Given that North Somerset residents today, a great extent to residents tomorrow, shared spend in these areas will help improve education skills in the whole of West England. Thank you so much again, and I hope that you can show support as the motion is not amended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to move to PS02, Tim Warren. You have 1 minute, Tim. I think Tim Warren is coming into the room. Sorry, I was being a bit previous. He's not here. Beg your pardon. I will move on to PS03, David Redgewell, speaking for Rail Future, Sevenside and Southwest Transport Network. You have 1 minute, David Redgewell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to say that it's very, very important that we get this right. The Bristol City region requires North Somerset to join. Our public transport network doesn't see a boundary between North Somerset and Bristol, South Gloucester and Baines. And it's very important that we find a way forward on this. Also important, the Secretary of State finds the money for North Somerset's public transport network in order to make sure they can join on the same terms as the rest. But North Somerset is an integrated part of the Greater Bristol City region. It has the airport and the seaport in the area, and it's very, very important that we don't leave them out for another 5 years. We must find a solution, and I'm calling on Luke Hall tonight, the local government minister, to intervene and make sure this is properly funded and this enlargement goes ahead as a local authority. Thank you. Thank
you very much indeed. I would now like to move to PS04, Councillor Claire Young. Is Claire in the room? I would like to.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. You have 1 minute to speak to your statement, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm taking the unusual step of speaking at another council because the Mayor's actions will have consequences for people across the West of England. Blocking North Somerset joining hurts South Gloucester residents, whom I represent, and I hope members of this council will recognise it hurts Bristol residents too. Adding North Somerset will strengthen the voice of the West of England nationally and help us to work together to tackle the major issues of transport, housing, climate change, skills and the local economy. The consultation should go ahead and it should be used to strengthen the West of England's hand in the negotiations with government, to show that this region has the will and the desire to work together if they offer the right deal. If they don't, that is the time to block it. Our clout has already been damaged by an invisible Metro Mayor. Let's not compound that by telling government we lack the confidence to fight for a good deal for our region. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to just check whether Tim Warren is in the waiting room. I'm afraid it appears that Tim Warren hasn't been able to join us this evening. Oh, apparently Tim Warren's having technical problems. So what I will do is if we can get him in, then I will bring him in to speak to his statement. I think that's only fair and proper. In the meantime, that concludes the statements received from members of the public. There were no statements received from councillors. Council is asked to receive and note these statements, which I have also referred to the Mayor for his information and consideration. We will move now to public questions received. Please note that questions have been published on the website and are shared on the screen now. One member of public has submitted questions and indicated that they wish to speak at the meeting. Suzanne will read her questions to the Mayor and he will be able to reply verbally. Following that response, Suzanne can ask a supplementary question. I think we may have problems. I'll just check to see whether Suzanne is in the waiting room. Yeah, I'm really sorry about this. Suzanne is also having problems getting in. So we'll go back to those people when they're able to join us. So what we'll do now is we'll now move to councillors' questions received. Please note that the questions have been published on the website and are shared on the screen now. Councillors, the same procedure applies. You will ask your question to the Mayor and he will reply verbally. You can then ask one supplementary question. I will go to Councillor Paula O'Rourke for CQ01 and CQ02. So Councillor O'Rourke, if you'd like to ask your question to the Mayor, thank you.
Is it going to be displayed? I'll just paraphrase it. Essentially, what I was asking was, the Mayor has told us that it was the issue about funding and governance, which are the problems. And my question essentially is, what's the difference? And if you could describe the difference between the deal that's there from a point of view of finance and also from governance, and what he actually wanted. So what are the obstacles and the hurdles that have got us to the situation where here now at the very last minute, we haven't reached any sort of accommodation?
Thanks, Paula, and I appreciate the question and the approach. The first difference is that I've been sharing is that there is no deal on the table for us to consider or to agree. There haven't actually been any talks or negotiations with government. The government cancelled 2 scheduled meetings to discuss the potential of a deal, which we think is an indication of a lack of interest. Meanwhile, as I'll share later, they've written a letter to Baines and North Somerset asking them to engage in an expanded Somerset, which we think that with the absence of any conversation, the delayed meetings, and that letter went out before the letter came from the Minister, Luke Hall, talking to us about WECA. So we've got a number of issues here going on at the same time. In terms of our objectives and looking at the difference between what we're trying to get done and what is not on offer, but the risks that come in, with the combined authority, and actually in our submissions to the spending review, we've listed billions of pounds worth of infrastructure investment for Bristol. Temple Meads, Temple Quarter, Hengrove Park and Bot Yard, mass transit, flood defences, Western Harbour, our strategic ring of park and rides. Now, here are some of the risks. That these schemes within the combined authority then are drawn into competition with the schemes of 3 other local authorities for the same pot of money rather than 4. If that money is not expanded, we are competing for the same sum of money with those schemes. There are a couple of considerations. I'm sorry, I will just work through it and then I'll try and wrap up quick. There are a couple of the governance that I mentioned in line with that are on these two points. We have said we want assurance about the governance within the combined authority before we start going down this track and potentially get to the point of no return. The first governance concern is about voice. So we would then be one voice among 4 authorities rather than one voice among 3. I think there are a couple of other complications to that that pose a risk to Bristol, that we would be the only city voice amongst 3 local authority rural voices with a metro mayor who is elected by a rural constituency. So we would need the combined authority to understand and safeguard the interests of a city amongst their political leadership. That's orientation and mandate comes from rural priorities. And if we look at the relationship between Bristol and the neighbours historically, there's been a very strong narrative around clipping Bristol's wings, not expanding to the point that the consequences of Bristol's growth spill over the boundaries and hit village life. We even had the statement from North Somerset, we don't want any of Bristol's poor people coming down here. So we wanted safeguards within the governance that our interests would be looked after. The second governance issue relates to the methodology for the distribution of funds. So at the moment, there is an assumption within the combined authority that any money gets split three ways, irrespective of the size of the population, irrespective of the size of the economy or the complexity and inequalities within the population. I'll give you an example. The High Streets Fund came in, £10 million, essentially split three ways, despite the fact that Bristol has 47 high streets, South Gloucestershire 11 and Baines 35. That has never been dealt with, and we've been raising this with the combined authority for some time. We've had meetings recently where this statement was clearly made. Any additional money comes in just needs to be split four ways. On all of those accounts, we end up potentially shortchanging Bristol, right? Getting a disproportionately small amount of any money for a larger population with a bigger economy. And we've asked them to address this, and they just haven't. And on the point about voice, I will just share at the combined authority meeting on Friday, the Baines leader tried to get Hengrove housing, 1,400 houses, the decision about that delayed until the new year, right? And the Baines leader and the North Somerset leader also spoke out against our mass transit system, which we need a decarbonised transport offer for a city that's going to grow by 100,000 people over the next 25 years. Now, what we don't want to do is end up in a system, a machinery that cannot uphold the needs of a rapidly urbanising and a growing city population.
Councillor O'Rourke, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. I hear that you're saying about defending the financial deal and the governance for Bristol. But I just wonder, again, I don't really quite understand why we're here at 5 to midnight when, you know, there's a deadline supposedly of next week. And I'd like to ask you, what have you been able to do to use your position on the committee? I mean, did you put forward proposals during the negotiations of what you actually would want?
So on the timeline, this has been one of the points of frustration. So quite some time ago, I won't remember the exact month, and this talks about some of the accusations around the politics. Don Davis phoned me up and said, is it worth joining the combined authority? Because there have been concerns about the performance of the combined authority, its ability to set our aspiration, its ability to get money spent, right? Don phoned me and said, should I go for the combined authority? Now, if I was being mischievous, I could have said no, but it's not my ambition not to have North Somerset in the combined authority. So I said to Don, I do actually think there are issues with the combined authority, but for you and North Somerset, it is the right thing to go ahead and try to join the combined authority. So there's been no kind of subterfuge or smoke-filled rooms about that. I said this to Don, go for it. Last summer, I phoned up Don and I phoned up Tim Bowles, and I said, look, this is coming up. We're coming up. It's very late in the day. You've had 2 years, since Don got elected with a clear aim to join the combined authority. The combined authority and Don have had 2 years to work together to deal with the challenges in the combined authority, its poor performance, and to look at getting a second deal. Other combined authorities are on their 8th deal now, right? So I was clear, and I said, the problem is, I don't want you coming back saying Marvin's blocking the expansion of the combined authority. Let me spell out to you very clearly what's needed for us to get this across the line. We need a bigger financial pie so that we don't end up splitting existing money 4 ways rather than 3, which works against the interests of Bristol. And we want our interests safeguarded. We got some big infrastructure needs coming through. By definition, the investments we want in Bristol are going to be high compared to our neighbours. You don't need as much infrastructure investment in Thornbury or Chewstoke as you do in Bristol. And so we want that so, and that's what we have to deal with. So I was clear that work has not been done. And what I've said to the neighbouring authorities is 1 minute to midnight, thinking that not by dealing with those issues, you just edge it closer to the deadline, that we'll feel under so much pressure that we prepare to cross the line with phenomenal risk to Bristol people and no guarantees, about that money. That's why we've come to this point. We're clear on the price. We think, again, if you discount it's 200, at least, 200 million additional, 8 million a year for the 30 years. But again, they should have been negotiating a new deal 2 years ago. And if government was serious about this as well, you've got a Conservative Metro Mayor, a Conservative government, Conservative ministers, they should have said, you know what, we see an opportunity now to give our Conservative Metro Mayor a win. Let's have that chat about what's needed to get this across the line. That work's just not been done. And now they're asking Bristol to come and, pick up the slack and take all the risk. So that's our challenge. It is good for North Somerset, but being good for North Somerset does not necessarily mean it's automatically good for Bristol. And that's the challenge that we've been navigating.
Thank you. Councillor O'Rourke, do you have your second question to ask?
Yes. Second question was about scrutiny. Again, it all relates to this 1 minute to midnight situation that we're in now. And my question was, did you not consider during the year of these negotiations, or even 2 years, of asking for this item to be brought to WECA scrutiny so that it could leverage your support for you through using, through publicising it to members, and it wouldn't be coming as such a surprise to everybody now?
I think it's a fair point, actually, Paul, about scrutiny. But I've kind of had a principle of not messing with scrutiny's agenda. I've been asked about it in council here and just letting scrutiny do what scrutiny does. But I think there would have been an incredible opportunity for scrutiny to facilitate the debates around, we've known for 2 years, as again about North Somerset, around what was needed to get North Somerset across the line, how that could be done without risking the amount of the investment pot that was actually available to Bristol for its disproportionately large investment needs and schemes, and also to look at the existing methodology of whether it should just be any sum of money gets split 3 ways or potentially 4, or whether there should be a new methodology that actually looks at the scale of economic opportunity, economic risk, complexity of the population, and begins to make investment decisions accordingly. So, I take the challenge. It wasn't, I don't automatically consider scrutiny to be there for me to facilitate debates, but it potentially could have been a means of having this debate. But it is the case. This is like, the kids ain't done their own work, and they're coming in a minute to more midnight asking the teacher to give them a pass on the paper anyway. It's just not, the work has not been done.
Councillor O'Rourke, do you have a supplementary question for the Mayor?
Well, just briefly, to ask for an assurance that the Mayor would embrace scrutiny going forward on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to move to CQ03, Councillor Stevens. If you'd like to ask your question to the Mayor, please.
Thank you. Hello, Marvin. I hope you're well and your family are well. I'm supportive of a full local authority area. I see if it can work, it's the only way we're going to solve sort of core problems like affordable housing, traffic congestion, sort of the transport issues, and the effects of those are homelessness, congestion, air pollution, and climate change. But the key thing is we need WECA to be able to work. And my concern is it's likely to have a Conservative mayor, possibly forever. So this is potentially our last chance to get in things of government. So I'm glad you're fighting for Bristol on money. The original question is, can you tell us any more than you have done already to Paula, what exactly is on offer right now, tonight, please?
So you listed a number of the challenges facing Bristol. I'd be interested to, and this is not a challenge to you, Kai, but this is an open question. I'd be really open to seeing historical evidence of our neighbours having a deep interest in the social challenges we face in Bristol around our inequalities, our deprivation, our homelessness, our need for affordable housing. So when we talk about, again, going into an arrangement that does involve a dilution of sovereignty over the city, right? The sovereignty we use to set priorities, that actually diluting our leadership over the city would actually result in a continuing prioritization of what we think are the challenges of a modern city. I am not aware of much of a track record of our neighbours doing that. That's not to say that they're bad, but they have their own priorities and their own challenges, and those haven't necessarily historically been those of Bristol. And in fact, those of you that have been around in the council for a very, very long time, and some of you have, will know that the cross-border relationships have not always been as cordial as they would. Look, in terms of the deal on the table, as I said, there is no deal on the table. There were no meetings with government. There was nothing on offer, and there were 2 cancelled meetings. The closest we've got to an offer is Luke Hall, MP, promising to have a conversation with the Treasury. Now, so we are being asked to take a bet on a brand new Minister of Local Government, not even a Secretary of State, getting money out of the Treasury, not for a specific government scheme that they could point to. We built that bridge, we built that train station, we put, this flood defence in place. But we're making a bet on a new minister, relatively junior, getting money out of the Treasury for a political structure. At a time in which public sector pay is being frozen, the economy is shrinking, we're reducing the amount of our foreign aid budget against the wishes of the President-elect of the United States, with whom we are depending on for a trade deal. Where we think there is traction for this minister or this government to get money for a new political structure that is not tied to a specific project that the minister could then point to and say, hey, we're treating your money responsibly, we've built this and this is how many jobs it's created, rather than we've put it into a political vacuum, by the way, of a combined authority that is properly recognised as underperforming. I think that's a big bet, and it's incredibly optimistic. And I think when we're talking about taking Bristol down this path, we have to be very, very clear that we are minimising the risk by maximising the certainty that our interests are going to be upheld. Let's add the other dynamic to this. It's a Conservative metro, and this is not about Tim as a human being. I get on well as Tim is a very decent person, but let's be straight about it. It's a Conservative metro mayor. The MP is from South Gloucestershire, the same place as the Conservative metro mayor, and he's cancelled 2 meetings. You think in 2 years, a Conservative metro mayor can't have a phone conversation, smoke-filled rooms or otherwise, with his own party to talk about how he can get that party to give him a victory and expand the combined authority. If he can't get that call in 2 years, what's going to happen if we actually kind of pick up the slack and go across the line and begin to, go down that path of diluting our sovereignty and our investment priorities in Bristol? I just think it's quite fanciful and would be politically naive and at great risk to the people of Bristol.
Councillor Stevens, do you have a supplementary question for the Mayor?
Yes, I do, please, if I may. You've mentioned in your reply to Paula aspects of governance and generally the sharing of money and the dilution of voting. That's fair enough. I'm interested in whether you feel there's other aspects of the governance of WECA that you could fight for at this stage. Because I see a huge democratic deficit. I think it needs to be much more open to scrutiny, and that way the other local authorities that surround us, to use your phrase, potentially clip our wings, would have a better understanding of how dependent they are on Bristol, whether it's the economy, which a lot of the local authorities depend on.
Councillor Stevens, I'm struggling to work out, is this a question or a statement?
It's the statement's finished and the question is right now. Thank you, Lord Mayor, for assisting me. So the question is, would you add within the rule, within your negotiations for better governance, bringing in better democratic accountability and scrutiny?
I think we've always found it a bit strange that, you know, we do full council, I do public questions, I get called before this committee, I do a bi-weekly Facebook Live, I do a bi-weekly press conference when journalists can ask me anything they want. But, and again, it's the machinery. I guess it's not, but the kind of lack of contact between the combined authority politics and the public. There are other structures in which that is more visible and more transparent. So yeah, I mean, on a selfish point, I thought, would someone ask someone else some questions about why stuff is or isn't happening, please, right? But on a broader scale, yeah, I mean, I see that. I obviously don't attend scrutiny meetings, so I don't know what scrutiny say about what more traction they could or could not have, other than the point that Paula made just now, which, you know, I'd support. As I said, I want to keep well away from shaping scrutiny's agenda or anything like that. But yeah, I certainly think there's room for greater contact with the general public.
And councillors?
Yeah, and councillors, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to move to CQ04. Your first question, Councillor Fodor, if you'd like to ask your question, please, to the Mayor.
Yes, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. So Mayor Rees, when the combined authority was being mooted and we had our meeting and we discussed how we were going to vote to join it, and the fact it was because funding was on offer, that funding deal offered by the government was a certain sum, and the authority was to be 5 members, 4 leaders or yourself as a mayor, plus the Metro Mayor. And in the end, it was 4 people, leaders, yourself and a Metro Mayor, because it was a smaller area. But the funding wasn't changed. So what's your view of the fact that that full sum was made available? It wasn't shrunk by a quarter when we formed that authority. And you've said many times the authority is the leaders and the Metro Mayor. Could you comment on that?
I'll try. I was just trying to follow it a bit. I think if the point was, how did I feel about the initial offer of £900 million, 30 million a year for 30 years, staying at that level, even when North Somerset didn't join, clearly there was a degree of advantage in that. There's a disadvantage in North Somerset not joining us, because we weren't, as big as we could have been. But let's be frank, there's a mix in that, isn't there, right? Because there were some of the things that we want to get done that don't depend on North Somerset, such as the regeneration around the Temple Quarter, Hengrove. So that money staying at the same level was obviously welcome to us. It was a real concern that it would be shrunk when they didn't join.
Councillor Fodor, would you like to ask a supplementary question to your first question? Thank you.
Put that aside and hear the second. Come to the second question first, if you don't mind.
Yes, if you. So you're going to ask your second question, and then the Mayor will be able to respond to a supplementary on your second question. Then.
Thank you. Only? Are you saying I forego the second supplementary?
Well, you've asked a question. You'll have the opportunity to ask a supplementary question to that first question, which you've obviously saying you don't need that. Then you're going to ask your second question to the Mayor. He will respond, and you then, after that response, you can ask a supplementary to the second question. Are you clear about that?
Okay, sorry, that wasn't how I meant it. So I'll do a supplementary now. I wanted to hear both answers first, but let's come to a supplementary now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. So that money was larger, as you say. It was a bit of a bonus at the time, despite the difference in the scale, the size of the combined authority. Have there been discussions about raising that sum year by year, or adding additional sums or functions over this period, because we've kind of done better because it was been shared among fewer, only 3 unitary authorities? So
do you mean going for a new deal when you say raising that funds? What I don't quite follow what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Well, I'll answer what I think you said because I'm not 100% sure, Martin. But essentially, look, it is split 3 ways rather than 4. And again, I say we got a question of methodology around how that investment is distributed. But now we are where we are. It's the sum of money we got for Bristol. That is the baseline now, and we can't undermine that baseline or put that baseline at risk. It's also worth sharing that the combined authority should have been driving for new deals, for new money. Manchester signed their first deal. Greater Manchester signed their first deal in 2014. They've had 5 more since. Right? Liverpool have had 3 new deals. We're still on the same deal. So again, this is not about. Again, I raised this in the phone call. This is not about Bristol wanting to block anything. This is about the failure and the underperformance of the combined authority to actually get the deals to take us forward and to earn the resources needed to cover the costs and risks of expansion. And there are costs and risks to expansion, but you take on those costs and risks because you've got clarity of the benefits that are coming. We got. Can we go back to somebody comment? It's worth going back and watching some of the video of the debates that we had in the council chamber when we were debating the combined authority. I'll quote some, I won't name it. This was from one of the party members, non-Labour. They said, let's look at the deal. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? It's a slight leap of faith. That's where some of our reticence comes from. What we think is important is that we engage the Bristol public on this. We've got to also see as much as we can of what the final deal is. The devil is always in the detail of these things. Now, that was a very prominent member of an opposition party talking about the first combined authority vote. We have less detail and less certainty and more risk now than we did then. And I agree, the devil's in the detail. It's in the stuff that is not being put in the papers or on Radio Bristol. It's in the governance, it's in the methodology of our investment decisions. It's in the safeguarding of Bristol's voice in the face of 2 or 3 rural authorities. I'm not saying they necessarily be anti-Bristol, but we need a combined authority agenda that understands and drives the interests of the city without which there would be no combined authority and has a disproportionate amount of need and complexity.
Thank you. Councillor Fodor, would you like to ask your second question to the Mayor now, please?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I was surprised I had to ask them sort of one at a time, but never mind. As a member of the combined authority, all the other members, including the Metro Mayor, and I take it this can be slanted one way or another, there are different perspectives on this, but it's suggested that the implications for additional functions, powers and funds being offered could be affected because at least some people are saying you've been seen to be blocking the expansion of WECA. Do you think it affects the additional powers, functions and resources if it's seen that Bristol is potentially the obstacle? Well,
there's no clarity. There is no list of additional powers, resources or functions being put on the table. What the closest to an offer we have is of a new minister talking to Treasury about getting some money. Bear in mind too, I mean, that Bristol's fingers are, we've learned about trusting MHCLG, haven't we? At the beginning of COVID, we were told, do whatever you need to do to meet this challenge. Then that changed to, we're going to share responsibility. That changed to, well, as long as you've done the things we specifically asked you to do. That turns into a £9 million shortfall in COVID money, despite all the grand talk at the beginning. We've seen what's happened in Manchester. We're seeing it again now. We're facing a phenomenal hit on local government finance. Again, shortfall in funding us around COVID. There is no track record at the moment from national government on actually stepping up to the plate, despite the promises, and meeting the needs of local government. So I'm being asked to bet Bristol's interests on the word of a government that has shown its inability to not only listen but step up to its promises. And I think that's not a bet that we should be making on behalf of Bristol. Last time we went down this route, the money was put up front. That's what's done. We were clear there were risks, but it was 30 million a year for 30 years. We knew what the deal was. And many people in the chamber, when they debated it, was split in and of themselves. As the quote from my opposition politician shared earlier on, they voted for it in the end, but they were split and they were very concerned. We've got less certainty now than we did then, and all the risks. And I would also just make the point again, we are still pressing out. I've just heard now from the spending review about winning the funding for St Anne's Station. We have been pressing our case with government on our infrastructure needs. I spoke at a number 10 gathering just last week, along with Steve Rotherham and the leader of Belfast, invited by Sir Ed Lister to make our pitch on our investment needs. The Combined Authority is one means of getting money, but there are others. And I'd say actually our reputation in Bristol for having ambition and driving forward is very strong. Hence, we were invited to the number 10 pitch, followed up by a nice personal email from Sir Ed Lister, who's now obviously interim chief of staff to Prime Minister Johnson. So, we're pressing, and what we have to do is safeguard the line of investment for the city. We need it.
Councillor Fedor, would you like to ask a supplementary to your question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mary, for that explanation. So I think the crunch issue is you and the other members of the Combined Authority need to press for additional functions and powers and resources. The ones for combined authorities are presumably not the identical same funds as you ask for Bristol itself. They're ones for a combined authority to develop within its powers and functions, and we want those to grow. Can you say what you will do now to make sure it does get a better track record with government and does gain additional powers, resources, and so on for our region?
We're always making the case for the investment we need. As I said, I spoke at number 10, we took a trade trip to the US. We were one of the two core cities, Bristol, Cardiff, and then obviously with Newport, that established the Western Gateway. We are constantly making our case and identifying the vehicles to try and get the investment we need at scale for mass transit, housing, and the rest of it, right? Even our City Leap, we're down to 3 providers a day. So we're doing that. But I do what I can to make sure there's a deal. And as I said, we made it explicitly clear to the Metro Mayor and to Don last year that there has to be a bigger cake, or sorry, earlier this year, again, there has to be a bigger cake. We have to look at the governance. We have to safeguard Bristol's interests in that. Now, with that, I make that case, and while going and batting for resources, but it is also up to the Metro Mayor to go and win that. It's Conservative Metro Mayor, Conservative government. If they can't get the meeting, and if it can't happen, I don't know what meetings happen, but I'm not aware of any meeting. I'm aware of meetings being cancelled, and we have no deal. Then that's an issue. But again, let's come back. There is a context to this context. As Paula pointed out, we are right at the deadline. The context is, while other areas have gone on to get deals, we're still on the first one. The work has not been done. The space has not been made for expansion. And so where we are is we are dealing with the consequences of a failure to deliver and a failure to deal with the internal challenges of how you have different kinds of authorities with different kinds and scales of investment need, looking at a single pot of money. That failure is the list of where we are. As I said, like the best one images I've got, if you fail an exam, you can't blame the teacher if you didn't do your revision. One of the images that someone's shared, and I won't embarrass them by saying, is like it's like buying a flat, like a leasehold flat. Like you pay for it, but you don't know the terms of the leasehold. Right? We'd be crossing a line saying, okay, we're getting into this without knowing about the consequences that are coming our way, the risks to the city. That is a big bet, especially in the face of a treasury that is, I just don't think it's, you may differ, but at this moment in time, it wants to evidence that it's investing in economic development if it's releasing money at all. The idea that the Treasury is going to release money to a combined authority that's commonly recognised as underperforming, relatively invisible, and it's just a political organisation rather than specific projects, I think would be optimistic, to put it politely.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
And then, I'm sorry, and then, sorry, dare I say, and then we'd be left going down that rabbit hole of moving towards an expanded combined authority with no additional money, with all the risks that we've been sharing this evening.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to move to CQ06. Councillor Hickman, if you'd like to ask your question to the Mayor, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Marvin, I think actually you have answered the question that I was going to ask you, which is I was going to ask you just to reiterate that the idea of North, you're very open to the idea of North Somerset joining in principle, but about financial settlement has to be in place. Is there anything else you want to add to whatever you've said?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say, yeah, I'm not opposed to North Somerset joining, but it has to be under the right conditions. North Somerset joining the combined authority in and of itself is good for the West of England economy. It's in the travel to work area, and it makes sense. But safeguarding the success of Bristol's economy is more important to the West of England economy than North Somerset joining the combined authority. Now, that's not a boastful statement about Bristol thinking it's all special. It's just a statement of economic fact. So we are not just looking out for the interests of Bristol. What we're doing is looking out for the interests of the engine of the West of England economy. It's a subtlety that, again, you know, in easy headlines and easy motions and so forth, there are so many just statements that are made as though they're true with no kind of scratching of the surface. We continue to work closely with North Somerset. In fact, when they didn't join the combined authority, I went down to Weston-super-Mare at the time to meet with Nigel Ashton, and we talked about how we have a close working relationship, because as we said to Nigel, actually our relationship with North Somerset, irrespective of the combined authority, is one of the most important borders we have, particularly when we think about housing down there. And we talked about how we would work together, and actually I think we had a reasonable working relationship. North Somerset is in the joint committee. So we work together, continuing to work together through the joint committee. And as I said, when I was asked by the leader of North Somerset about joining the combined authority, I said, it's the right thing for you. I do note too, the meeting, because obviously I was getting notifications of things being said at a meeting in North Somerset a week or maybe 2 weeks ago. Look, all the arguments in that meeting were, I don't disagree with many of the arguments made, right? In that it's not ideal for North Somerset to join, not to be in the combined authority. You know, I recognise that, and I don't say that's not true. I think it's true, but again, it's not necessarily true that the flip side of that is that it is good for Bristol to come in on the current terms. The terms have to be right. I must say as well. I mean, and listen, and this is not. I'm not going to make a. It is about party, but I don't want it to be seen as a kind of cheap party point, but it is an observation. For all the arguments being made about how important North Somerset joining the combined authority is to Bristol now, why were those arguments not being made within the Conservative Party in public when they didn't come in the first instance? If it was that important, as you are suggesting today, why did you not say it in 2017, or was that party before economic interests? There's a glaring hole there. I just struggle to reconcile with all the drama and circus of pulling an extraordinary full council and all the statements that have been made. Let's be consistent on these things. If it is critical, should have said something at the time. And actually, in dealing with the issues today, be serious about the interests of Bristol. Otherwise, the danger is you end up selling the city and you end up selling the people of Bristol short.
Thank you. Councillor Hickman, do you have a supplementary question for the Mayor?
No, I don't. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes questions received from members. I would now like to go back in our agenda, as it were. I believe that Tim Warren is with us now, and he has submitted a statement. If Tim Warren can come into the room, and then he has 1 minute to speak to his statement. Is Tim with us? I can't see him. Tim, if you're in the room and I can't see you, I'm afraid at the moment. Oh, hello.
Let me know.
You have 1 minute to speak to your statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. These are unprecedented times, and the way we work together for the next few years will be crucial. there will be a huge hole to fill both economically and socially. And as always, if we don't fill it, the less well off seem to suffer the most. For local authorities to work to maximum effect, the combined authority has to do so as well. That will be much more effective as a whole, including North Somerset. It's a mishmash without. All authorities will benefit from their joining. And I think, you're not getting me? All authorities will benefit from their joining. And Marvin needs to speak to the minister, I think, and the ministers need to convince Marvin that it will be beneficial to Bristol, not detrimental. And the next Metro Mayor, whoever they are, wherever they come from, needs to be above politics and be the representative of the West of England to Parliament rather than vice versa. I know there's issues about funding.
You have a couple of seconds left, Tim.
Okay, I just want to finally say we need to join. North Somerset are a key part to the area. And at a later date, I'd also like to see the whole of Somerset and Gloucester joining as well.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for being patiently waiting to make your statement. So thank you. I would now like to move to the members of public, the questions submitted. We just have the one question from member of public, and that's from Suzanne Audrey. I believe you're in the room. If you'd like to ask your question, Mayor will then respond, and then we can go to a supplementary. Okay, that's Suzanne. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I've actually got two questions, so I don't know how this works, but anyway, so the first part of the first question really, I think it's obviously for Marvin. I'm just trying to work out the public engagement in this process and whether it's possible to have the public consultation without all of the detail. I know what you've said, we need to know the finances. Is it possible to have a sort of in principle consultation about whether the public want North Somerset to join, and then go into the negotiations about the actual money?
I don't see how that works, because we don't. What would the question be on the consultation? Because last time out, the offer, the offer was clear. The combined authority is not there to just set up a new political structure or sit around a campfire, hold hands, sing Kumbaya and be nice to each other. The combined authority is all about getting money, right, and resources for our patch. So in the absence of any clarity of what the money is, what are we consulting on? This is we don't come in saying we're going to have a fuzzy feeling at the end of it. We come in saying we're going to get houses built, mass transit system, we're going to get grade 1 office space, we're going to get flood defence. These are the things that this is about, and that's money. And if there's no money on the table, then there's no deal. I don't see what the consultation is. It makes it very difficult to go to the general public.
Suzanne, do you have a supplementary question to your first question you just asked the Mayor?
Well, yes, I suppose, and it would be asked you really, Marvin, to reinforce that then. So when the question comes to the public, what you're saying is it will tell us how much money, extra money comes into the area as a result of North Somerset. That's what we'll be consulted on. Are we happy or not with that amount of money coming into the area?
Yeah, I think it has to be. But here's the rub of it, right? At the combined authority meeting on Friday, the leader of Baines tried to have Hengrove delayed, right? 1,400 homes in Bristol. And two other leaders then questioned our mass transit system, which I think most of us would believe in. We needed a mass transit system decades ago. We need to progress now. So we're moving towards strategic outline business case next year, preferred options by March. Two leaders questioned that, right? And within the combined authority structure, I suppose in many ways, they can. So part of entering into a combined authority is ceding a degree of sovereignty over Bristol by giving our neighbours some influence over us. Now, we can make the case for that, and we did in 2017. We believed on balance we should cede some of our sovereignty and enter into this joint endeavour because there was money on the table. So I would have to say to you, okay, Suzanne, we're going to see some sovereignty, but you might want to see the whites of the eyes and say, okay, well, I'm willing to enter that, but I need to know what we get from it. at the moment, I can't tell you what the advantage is to Bristol of doing that, other some vague truisms that if we all work together, we'll do better. I think that's got about as much certainty as trickle-down economics. It sounds good on paper, but it doesn't always work itself out because there's lots of complications to it. But can I just add something in as well, just in terms of how strong the offer is from government? So on the 14th of October, this letter that people are talking about that came from Luke Hall said, and we, in parallel to this process, we will continue to have discussions with Treasury and other colleagues across Whitehall about your request for additional devolved funding. But in light of the timescales you must now work towards, these discussions must take place alongside the consultation process. Again, you've done it a minute to midnight. Should have been done. You've had 2 years to get this done. But he says, I would encourage you to take the first step of consultation now to keep open the possibility of expanding WECA with the benefits that could bring. I'm fully committed to help you realise the ambition of strengthening WECA, as I'm confident it would benefit local people and build up the great work you are already doing here. There's nothing in there. It's yeah, pat you on the head, keep going letter. That was the 14th of October. On the 9th of October, this letter went from a senior civil servant in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to Baines and North Somerset and the other relevant authorities. The Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, in exercise of his powers under Part 1 of Local Government and Public Involvement in Health Act 2007, hereby invites any principal authority in the area of the County of Somerset, the area of Bath and North East Somerset, and the area of North Somerset to submit a proposal for a single tier of local government in accordance with paragraphs 1 to 3 below. I won't go in paragraphs 1 to 3 below. So you've got two offers from government there, Arthur and Baines, which Baines and North Somerset have responded to quite obviously, you know, using many of the arguments we have used about this. Is it in our interests? What's the deal, right? And why are you coming to us last minute and offering us this kind of relationship? But you can see all government are riding two horses here. So you've got two offers, a Treasury that ain't giving out any money, and an underperforming combined authority. Once we go down that rabbit hole, what are the chances of a deal that actually will prevent Bristol residents being disadvantaged in the financial non-settlement that we're being offered?
Thank you very much. Suzanne, would you like to now ask your second question to the Mayor, please? Thank you.
Yes, and it sort of comes with a sort of wider issue really about the public being able to understand this. So I wondered that a letter was sent by all of you, I think, all relevant leaders to I can't remember who you sent that letter to. I wondered, can we see these letters? Are these letters available to the public? I mean, I appreciate you're not in charge of the WECA communications and website, but it's actually quite difficult to find the information, as a member of the public, to actually find out what goes on. So is there some easy way for the public to get hold of these bits of information so that we can actually understand the arguments better?
Yeah, we're happy to share those letters. I'll put them in my blog. It's also worth sharing that Councillor Cheney attended a meeting just a few months ago with Clark, and in that meeting spelled out to the minister at the time as well what was needed. Just because we've been very aware, and I've been very aware that this was coming down the track. Stuff wasn't being done. We wouldn't be happy at the level of risk, and they come and lay it up my door. That's why we've been very clear to be very explicit all the way through what was needed. So the question is, when people have put down the phone after we've made it very clear to them what was needed to get this across the line, what did they then go and do next? Did they just think, oh, well, I put the phone down, let's just wait for it to go down the line till we can get some great newspaper headlines out of this and make Bristol look like it's a negative blocker on the combined authority? Because that's what it feels like when we've just been saying, look, guys, you've got to have a bigger cake, you've got to give the city protections. That's all, it's just straightforward, but they ain't done the work.
Thank you. Suzanne, would you like to ask a supplementary to that question?
No, I think that's helpful. It's helpful about the sharing of information so that we can follow the debate as it goes on. Thank you very much.
I didn't mean to be disrespectful. It was to Simon Clark, not just Clark, I should have said. So that was the conversation that Councillor Cheney had and was very, very clear about what was needed.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes questions from members of public and members of council. Written replies will be published on the website. Thank you. We now move to agenda item 5. That's the motion on WECA. Please may I call upon Councillor Hopkins on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group to move the motion. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. For many years, this region had a reputation with central government for poor teamwork, and it cost us dearly when it came to funding in all sorts of areas. For a few years, prior to the first mayor, we had a 4-authority West of England partnership. We did not have the same political views as some of the surrounding authorities, but we made it work. And it wasn't just Liberal Democrats and Tories. Labour members were involved. Some of the more senior Labour members were involved at that time as well. On transport, we had the Greater Bristol bus network, and thanks to colleagues who worked on that, and that actually made a significant difference. It actually increased the percentage of people who were commuting to work by bus, very significant. We couldn't have got it working in isolation, and we must thank all those who were involved in that. It made a positive difference to our reputation. Would have been somewhat better if it had been followed up by franchising, but there you go. So delivering a successful project on time and on budget as a partnership changed our reputation with central government. So when the next plan came up from us, it was BRT, and I'm sorry, we wanted a tram, but there's no way central government were funding one. We actually got about 2/3 of the national pot in 1 year for transport schemes, public transport schemes. And I actually remember vividly being interviewed by media people thinking that I was somewhat optimistic that we would get funding for all 3 elements of the BRT. We got it. Unfortunately, it was messed around by the first mayor, but it actually happened, and we got the money. We wouldn't have got it without all 4 authorities working together. The scheme was unfortunately unilaterally changed by our first mayor without much consultation with the neighbours. And that was a factor in the very poor decision by the Conservative administration in North Somerset not to join with the neighbours. They didn't like that, and they had some grounds for being upset. It was still a very bad decision. There's a huge economic fit between all the 4 authorities.
Councillor, you have 20 seconds left. Thank you.
Yeah. So I would fancy juggling backwards and forwards of figures and pretending everyone knows the exact answer. You haven't got it. But what we do know is proper cooperation produces a result. And we must now ask everybody to work together to make certain that we increase our teamwork across the 4 authorities. And that means not accepting the amendment.
Thank you. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Steve Smith to speak on behalf of the Conservative group to second the motion. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And it's a pleasure to second this motion tonight. Although I do rather wish that we didn't need to. We shouldn't really be here. It's blindingly obvious that North Somerset should be part of WECA. That's the whole point of WECA when it was set up, is to provide a single system of governance across the economic area with all 4 authorities in it. Now, I know it was North Somerset's choice not to join at that point, and that's a choice that, in my view, was a mistake, but it's a mistake that we can now put right. And it just makes perfect sense that we should. The economic case alone is overwhelming. There isn't a Bristol economy and a North Somerset economy. The 2 are combined. They're the same thing. At the last census in 2011, there were 25,000 people crossing the border from between Bristol and North Somerset every day for work. And I would be very surprised if that number hasn't gone up since and is continuing to go up. Huge chunks of our critical infrastructure that work for Bristol are in North Somerset. Bristol Airport, obviously, is in North Somerset. at least half of the Port of Bristol is in North Somerset. Many of the projects that have already gone on a regional basis, Metrobus, Metro Rail include North Somerset. And in fact, if we were sitting in City Hall physically tonight, we'd only be a mile from the border. You cannot separate the two. And in organisational and democratic sense, it makes sense as well. I had to look this up, but apparently there is a West of England Combined Authority Committee, I have to read my notes on this, and a West of England Joint Committee. And the two committees meet in the same room on the same day and consist of largely the same people, but one includes North Somerset and the other doesn't. Now, I'm fairly used by now to the way that councils do things, and I'm confused by this. How any normal person in the real world can be expected to understand who is making decisions about huge sums of money that affect them in a real way. The mind boggles. It's ridiculously complicated, and we've got an opportunity to put it right and get the right structures in place. Now, of course, if WECA grows, which it should, then of course the money has to grow with it. I don't think that's in dispute. Everyone agrees on that. But the way that you get to that point is by starting the process, starting the consultation, and that's what this motion is asking for. There isn't a point of no return. There isn't a bet or a gamble here. If the deal at the end of the process isn't right, then we don't sign it. But to complain that there's no deal when you're deliberately blocking the process that would get to a deal, it is just putting the cart before the horse, and it makes no sense at all. So please, let's support this motion tonight, unamended. Let's stop messing about, and let's do what everyone can see needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There has been an amendment from the Labour group. Please may I ask Councillor Threlfall to move the amendment. You have 3 minutes to speak to the amendment, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Every single person within this chamber supports, in principle, North Somerset joining WECA. It makes sense geographically, economically, and from a transport and planning perspective. However, it would be remiss not to mention that there are also risks, and these risks should be adequately scrutinised to ensure that the benefits are realised to all parties and none of the current members lose out. We're all Bristol City councillors, and therefore it's sensible to ensure that we consider that which benefits the residents who've elected us into these positions. It is perfectly reasonable to ask that our Metro Mayor does his job and ask for a new deal. Many other regions are in their second, fourth, or even eighth deal, whereas WECA has not progressed beyond the first, and this is hampering our growth and our ambition. The question that should be asked is, why has the Conservative Metro Mayor not phoned up his colleagues in a Conservative-run central government and negotiated in the same way that Andy Burnham, Steve Rotherham and Andy Street have done? If he has, why don't we know about it? I sit on WECA scrutiny. I work with cross-party councillors, and the current structures are just not fit for purpose. We've had no engagement on these issues to date. We're often kept out of the loop. Instead of approaching us, this public debate, rather than achieving its aims, has yet again reinforced the government the false narrative that we just can't work together. But we can work together, and there's lots of good evidence of that. It takes strong public-facing leadership to make it work. WECA has not achieved its full potential currently. Not only do we not punch above our weight, we're not achieving it. More worryingly, we're not getting a fair share of the funding that's secured. And if we're not careful and we don't ensure that the current issues are resolved and a fair funding settlement agreed, this could be exacerbated. The challenge with the original motion is it does not recognise any of these nuances. Therefore, this motion amendment calls for 3 things. 1, agree a financial ask as part of a second devolution agreement. It's not okay just to imagine the funding. We're already underfunded when it comes to transport and have big legacy issues. Where is this additional funding? Why haven't WECA scrutiny seen or heard any detail? More information is needed so a collective voice can be brought to government. 2, agree governance arrangements, including reinforcing scrutiny and stronger public engagement, which has been sorely lacking. We also need a commitment to review the methodology for distributing WECA funds. We need equality and parity to ensure that funding is getting to the communities that need it most. 3rd, publish the process for North Somerset joining WECA, including the deadlines. We have not had any clarity on this, and the goalposts have consistently been moved. We've had so many different deadlines. The 23rd of October, the 27th of November. What is the actual deadline? I'm confused why we're having now and not a year ago. Why did North Somerset need to join at the election and not before and not after? What is the legal guidance?
You have 20 seconds left.
We need
Councillor.
to understand this, and it needs to be published. It's fair and it's right for us all to seek these assurances. It's irresponsible otherwise, whilst expressing support to our North Somerset colleagues and for North Somerset to join as soon as possible. For that reason, I move this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Hickman to second the amendment. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Hickman, you're muted at the moment. Okay.
Yeah, hi. I second this amendment and reserve my remarks.
Thank you very much indeed. We'd now like to hear from the speakers on the amendment. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Pearce to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, let me be clear. I've always advocated the admission of North Somerset to WECA, but only with an adequate settlement, not merely financial, that reflects the obligations, responsibilities, and the ambitions of the local citizens and their administrations. In the context of COVID, mass unemployment, and Brexit, compensation for WECA enlargement is going to rank a long way down the Treasury's pecking order. Only today, the government has announced a real terms pay cut for public sector workers. This is the government that clapped for carers every night. Does anyone seriously think that they're going to cough up the money for WECA expansion? I don't think they do. I think the Tories and the Lib Dems know they're selling Bristol short. In refusing to sell Bristol short, we have been accused of playing politics. Could it possibly be that the Tories desperately want North Somerset votes to make up for the votes that will have lost as a result of Tim Bowles' abysmal term in office? It's like a card player increasing the stakes in the game by saying, I'll see what I'm going to call your politicking, and I'll raise you some blatant gerrymandering. The Tory Metro Mayor failed to get a deal from central government. The region needs a new financial and governance settlement. As Barry said, some combined authorities are on their third, fourth, or even eighth devolution agreement. Bristolians should not have to pay for Tim Bowles' incompetence. WECA needs to reinforce scrutiny and have stronger public engagement. There needs to be a review of the methodology for distributing WECA funds. Not all areas were created equal. Some are more equal than others. Despite making up the bulk of the population and being the main wealth creator in the region, Bristol is being neglected. Funding is not allocated proportionately to population. We need a deal that is fair, equitable, and recognises Bristol's contribution to the region. We want North Somerset to join, but only on terms which mean Bristol and the other authorities won't be financially disadvantaged. Mr. Mayor, must we really add watching out for the neighbouring authorities and their citizens to our job titles? Being the cabinet member for waste, I suppose I should be used to clearing up others' mess. Devolution by its very nature requires a surrender of sovereignty. Without an agreed settlement, we would lose sovereignty with no certainty of a compensating gain. We are being asked to consult Bristolians, but we can't tell them what we're asking them to agree. We can't tell them that what they will get out of it, and we can't even assure them that it's in their interests. So I don't think we should consult them.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. I hope you can hear me. I appreciate, I think, that everyone is now talking about how much they want North Somerset to join. But there have been several things said tonight that I simply have to respond to, and I'm afraid this amendment defangs the motion. It kicks it into the long grass. And what I'd like to start with is when we talk about finance. The government have been quite clear on this. If we start a consultation on the principle of North Somerset joining, because they want to know we have skin in the game on this, then they will start talking to us about the finances. And if at the end of that process, we don't like what the financial settlement is, the mayor has a veto. So he can walk away from the deal. So the analogy that's often been used is you wouldn't buy a house without knowing the price. You're right, but you talk to the estate agent. By starting the consultation, as soon as possible, we allow those conversations to happen and we find out what the financial deal is. Now, Councillor Pearce, you mentioned that we don't get our fair share. It may surprise you, I've just done a few little numbers on this. We have just under half the population, and we actually get just under half of the money that's handed to local authorities. The other half of WECA funding is spent strategically, and the reason for that is sometimes you have to spend money cross borders. So, for example, if you put a park and ride on the M32, the cost and spend may be in South Gloss, but the benefit with cleaner air and cutting traffic on our roads is actually felt in Bristol. That strategic view would be strengthened with North Somerset coming in as soon as it's possible to do so. When it comes to things like governance, I'm afraid I don't see bringing North Somerset in as weakening our sovereignty, because the way WECA is set up is the fact that all the constituent authorities have an awful lot of veto power when it comes to it. So we can veto a deal at the end if we don't like it. We can veto things like budgets, etc. We're not weakened with North Somerset coming in. We are strengthened. It was party politics 4 years ago that stopped them coming in, and I fear it's party politics is going to stop them coming in again. Now, on timelines, effectively, we know that originally the discussions on North Somerset joining, those should have been had last year, but there was a deal done that was said, we're going to do these after the May elections. But those elections didn't happen, so we are where we are. And we are tight on time. What the amendment does today is remove any time frame from those discussions. And that means we can kick it into the long grass. Time is running out, but it's not done yet. So I would urge people, don't support the amendment. Go with the original
20
motion.
seconds left, Councillor.
Thank you. You can tell I'm finishing. Because that way it's not kicked into the long grass. We start those discussions. We can have discussions on finances. And if in the early new year we don't like them, then we can walk away. But we'll know the deal. We'll have spoken to the estate agent. Please don't support the motion. Sorry, the amendment. Please support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor Comley to speak on behalf of the Green Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. I support this amendment and I'd like to explain my reasons. Fundamentally, I don't think we will get unanimous support for the motion if it remains unamended. The motion as amended still clearly states that Bristol City Council believes North Somerset belongs in the West of England Combined Authority. Passing that statement with unanimous support is a strong signal to all involved. To central government and Minister Luke Hall, it says, we want you to prioritise our region. We want you to make a start on your end of the process for WECA to expand to include North Somerset. We want you to meet with our representatives, consider the settlement we propose, and, if necessary, push us to act where you need action from us. To Metro Mayor Tim Bowles, we are saying that you need to listen to genuine concerns and ensure that none of the existing WECA authorities loses out by this. We want you to have the guts to stand up for this region and pursue the powers and the funding that we need. And to Mayor Marvin Rees, it tells you that we want you to engage with this process with urgency and enthusiasm. If there is a need for better governance, scrutiny, public engagement, then do something about it. Take them to WECA scrutiny, where the cross-party, cross-boundary work can be done to solve them. If there's a need for better funding, you need to be talking to your counterparts in our neighbouring authorities, winning over allies, making that case stronger when you speak with one voice. This amendment does not prevent the consultation being launched on a timescale that gets North Somerset into WECA in 2021. I've been very clear that I could not support it if it did. It allows a consultation to proceed in parallel with continuing discussions on the details. I'm told that our neighbouring authorities are ready to press the button on that consultation as soon as we are. And if that's necessary to keep this process alive, then that is what you should do. We need a rational regional approach to tackling the challenges that we share, from housing to transport to economic recovery from COVID and Brexit, to a coordinated and effective response to the climate and ecological emergencies. I know that for some, including some within my own group, this amendment compromises too far and does not carry enough of a sense of urgency. Some are fearful that it is being tabled as a cover for blocking progress by kicking this into the long grass and doing nothing until it is too late. It's a judgment call. For me, it falls on the right side of the line and is a compromise worth making. But you will have to make your own judgment. I will be voting for it, and I encourage you all to do the same.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Kent to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Labour members who've clearly tried to work behind the scenes here to steer the Mayor away from his disastrous position of opposing North Somerset joining WECA. The amendment with the deletions mean that we accept the Mayor has managed to derail the regional cooperation project that North Somerset will not be allowed to join for 4 more years. Of course, this then leads us down the track of missing out on additional funding, which the government have stated in writing they're prepared to discuss with us. Will it cost our region £900 million? Will it cost even more? We don't know, but regional leaders have been very clear with us that those are the terms and figures that have been talked about. What has led the Mayor to play this game is hard for us to fathom. 15 years of joint working and collaboration has been ripped up by him. I have sympathy with the Labour members, given little choice, silenced from speaking out and trying to do what they are allowed to do. But unfortunately, this amendment deletes out crucial elements. It's not the right way forward. It deletes out the call to publish the statutory governance consultation by Friday. We know government insists on a response by Friday, and although they had expected us to have completed the consultation, if we publish it by Friday and include this in our response, we create the opportunity of moving to detailed financial negotiations, something we all want to see. Other council leaders have confirmed that if we indicate tonight we will publish the consultation, they will do the same. It can go live by this Friday and be a clear indication to government to move to the next stage of detailed negotiations. Secondly, it removes the clear and undisputed fact that the Mayor holds a veto at the end of the process. Without any logical explanation, he has chosen to sink the project before getting in the door and having the opportunity to unlock more funding and powers for our region. Let me repeat, he has a veto. He can veto a bad deal. Instead, he's ripped up the whole process before we even get to see a deal. If we wish to change our transport network, if we want to really affect climate change, deliver housing and jobs, we need to work as a region. We understand that. I find it bizarre that I even had to make this point this evening. I do hope that Labour members, and it appears Green members, will use their votes wisely here tonight and vote down this amendment, which is about keeping North Somerset out, not embracing them in WECA. I hope members do not hide behind the problems of WECA to justify supporting keeping North Somerset out. That really is shooting ourselves in the foot. It's disappointing that members don't have the strength to stand up today, to tell Mary
close, please. Thank you.
And vote down this amendment, whose one purpose is to silence the voices of concern and block North Somerset from joining. We'll be voting against the amendment.
Can you draw to close, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I will be voting against the amendment to support North Somerset joining WECA and unlock new additional funding and powers for all councils. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hopkins, would you like to respond to the debate on the amendment as the mover of the substantive motion? You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now you've heard speeches from both sides. I'd ask every member present here to make their own individual judgment, because quite frankly, just following orders has never been a very good excuse, in my view. So we've heard from the various communications from the leaders of the other authorities. That political firebrand Tim Bowles, who is demonised by the mayor. We've got the independent leader of North Somerset, who got elected and into that position by basically not being a Tory, which was, good move from him. Our Lib Dem leader in Baines, who basically just does not do confrontation at all, and the leader from Tory leader from South Gloucester. Now, who is it who's causing the disruption? Who should we actually believe on this issue? All those people or Marvin? Now, basically, I've watched WECA very, very closely. It's not a perfect institution. It's not made all the right decisions, and therefore you need another leader of that institution, which we're going to get anyway. But having said that, it's never made a Bristol Energy mistake, has it? It hasn't made anything like some of the foul-ups that have actually been made in Bristol City Council. So the mayor complaining about inefficiency in WECA is just absolutely staggering. A member of North Somerset Council actually said, and a very good quote, "You do not actually warm your own house by burning down your neighbour's house." Well, not only is the mayor attempting to burn down the neighbouring house, but these are 4 linked houses with a thatched roof, and he's poured petrol on them. So basically, we need here to be working together. We need to, and Labour members and Green members need to look at the reality of this. We've got this a decision tonight will affect hundreds of millions of people, but tens of millions of people over very many years. And if we get this wrong, there will be a huge price to pay for an awful lot of people. Please support the motion unamended.
Thank you very much. We will now move to the vote on the amendment. This will be done by a roll call. You are voting on the motion on the amendment, on the motion on the amendment, and the names will be read out in alphabetical order. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Abraham. Councillor Abraham. Councillor Don Alexander.
For.
Councillor Leslie Alexander.
Against.
Councillor Beach.
For.
Councillor Bradshaw. Councillor Brain.
For.
Councillor Bolton.
For.
Councillor Brooke.
For.
Councillor Breckles.
For.
Councillor Carey.
Against.
Councillor Cheney.
For.
Councillor Barry Clark.
For.
Councillor Stephen Clark.
Abstain.
Councillor Clough.
Against.
Councillor Comley.
For.
Councillor Craig.
For.
Councillor Chris Davies.
Against.
Councillor Mike Davies.
For.
Councillor Denyer.
For.
Councillor Dudd.
For.
Councillor Eddy.
Against.
Councillor Fodor.
For.
Councillor Godwin.
For.
Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Gollop.
Against.
Councillor Goulandris.
Against.
Councillor Hants.
For.
Councillor Hickman.
For.
Councillor Hiscott.
Against.
Councillor Holland.
For.
Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Jackson.
Against. No, against.
For. Hopkins down for 4. Sorry, apologies.
Councillor Hopkins.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Jammer.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Keane.
For.
Councillor Kent.
Against.
Councillor Kirk.
For.
Councillor Lake.
For.
Councillor Lovell.
For.
Councillor Massey.
For.
Councillor Mead.
For.
Councillor Malias.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Negus.
Against.
Councillor O'Rourke.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Phipps.
For.
Councillor Pickersgill.
For.
Councillor Quarterly.
Against.
Councillor Radford.
Against.
Councillor Rippington.
For.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Shah.
For.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Threlfall.
For.
Councillor Tinknell.
For.
Councillor Wellington.
For.
Councillor Weston.
Against.
Councillor Whittle.
For.
Councillor Windows.
Against.
Councillor Wright.
Against.
Mayor Rees.
For.
Councillor Abraham.
I'm against. I voted twice. You kept muting me centrally. Thank you.
Councillor Bradshaw. Councillor Bradshaw. That's all, Lord Mayor.
You can see on the screen that we have 42 for, 21 against, 1 abstention and 3 absence. So we will now move on to debate the motion as amended. I would now like to call upon Councillor Threlfall to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you. I beg your pardon, that must have really surprised you, Councillor. You did look a little surprised. I'm sorry. I would now like to call upon Councillor Tinknell to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor, and my apologies.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was brought up in North Somerset, and my mother and other close relatives still live there, and I have a strong affinity for the area. So nobody can say, I don't care about what happens there. And in other circumstances, I'd be demanding that North Somerset should join WECA. And I know it has significant infrastructure pressures which urgently need to be met, and that a combined authority will help to deal with those. But allowing North Somerset to become part of WECA without additional resources at a time when finances are already stretched to breaking point is not just wrong, it's wrong-headed. Along with transport infrastructure and strategic planning, employment and skills are key areas of responsibility for the combined authority. If a region is to make any effective recovery from the COVID crisis and then deal with potentially even greater challenges posed by Brexit, it's imperative that we invest in new skills. This is especially the case for Bristol, where some sectors of the economy have been badly hit by this double whammy. Indeed, in September, the LGA noted that the devolution of the adult education budget to WECA constituted one of the most significant changes to the way employment and skills would be managed and delivered across the region. And yet, the allocation of £14.7 million for that budget for 2019-20 was nearly £3 million below expectations. This is likely to lead to underperformance and lack of delivery. So even under current arrangements, it's not enough. How can spreading the jam more thinly help anyone? And it's not just the LGA saying this. The leader of North Somerset Council himself, Councillor Davis, has said but it would be foolish to miss out on the extra powers and investment opportunities open to WECA and that nobody will want to do it if there's no additional cash around. In other words, there needs to be a parallel discussion about funding if this is a remotely viable option. For North Somerset simply to join WECA without further resources to support the addition of over 85,000 extra households would result in everyone being let down, residents of Bristol and residents of North Somerset, who would have been promised the impossible. Clearly, for this to work out, our current invisible Metro Mayor should be making sure national government stepped up to the plate and finds the cash needed. If he hasn't been banging on their door, he has failed in his duty to those he represents who are already within WECA. So to reverse the motto of the American Revolution, we must say very firmly, no representation without taxation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Gollop to speak on behalf of the Conservative group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by saying shame on the Green Party councillors who have let Mayor Rees off the hook on this issue. I think it's a real embarrassment, and I have to say it doesn't put any of us in a good light. The enlargement of WECA is fundamental to the economic and environmental well-being of Bristol and the Greater Bristol area. This amended motion pays lip service to the interests of our residents and then follows an oft-repeated Labour Party ploy, wreck the proposal by diluting its message. You did this most recently on Jubilee Pool by forcing an amendment and then ignoring local residents. I could list other attempts, but I want to concentrate on this issue. On the face of it, the amendment's innocuous, but what it does is remove the urgency. It kicks it into the long grass, keeps North Somerset out in the cold until 2025. Now, maybe by then Bristol won't have an elected mayor, but that's little compensation. Now, I have to say, I normally find Steve Pearce's contributions enlightening, and I often find myself agreeing with at least some of the lines of thought, even if I don't agree with the conclusions. But Steve, your comments today showed the sort of petty small-mindedness that is why WECA doesn't deliver. You said Bristol is the main wealth creator, but you're ignoring the fact that many of the wealth creators come into our city commuting from our neighbouring authorities, many of them coming from North Somerset. But no, we don't want North Somerset to be part of this. We'll say nice things, but actually we don't want them there. And when Mayor Rees talks about this purely being financial, the bit that baffles me most about the Green Party's standing is that to produce the increase in air quality, improvement in air quality, the reduction in pollution, improvement in transport, we need all the local authorities in the travel to work area to be working together. What do? No, we veto that. We stop them coming in. So we talk about finance, but we don't talk about the well-being of the residents that we represent. I have to say this amended motion is absolutely appalling. It ignores the benefits to our community and to our residents. For those reasons, my group will be abstaining because we are not in a position to support something that is so lame and ineffective. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Thomas to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I mean, first of all, I want to pick up Councillor Gollop's challenge. I think that what we have here is the opportunity to get everybody on board for stating clearly to government that everybody wants North Somerset to join in principle. There's the clarity there that consultation should go ahead. That's what we would ideally like. But we want Labour on board, sending that strong message to government that North Somerset should be part of this region. As I've said before, and others have said this evening, it is nonsensical that North Somerset isn't part of WECA. Nearly a quarter of North Somerset's workers work in Bristol. As we've heard, half of Bristol's port is in WECA, half of it isn't. Bristol's airport is in North Somerset and is outside WECA. So we welcome the request from people in North Somerset to join WECA. For years, the region has struggled to work together, and this is now a fantastic opportunity to work together for a better future. And obviously, I'd hope a greener future. We do want Bristol's mayor to change his mind, continue with the processes that support North Somerset becoming part of WECA, most importantly, the consultation. And it's important that councillors and local people have a voice in these huge decisions for the region, and they aren't just decided behind closed doors. That's why it's so positive that this meeting is taking place today. Together, our region will be stronger with North Somerset as part of WECA, and we can build the successful green future that everybody wants. All the evidence shows, with devolution in the rest of the country, that when regions prove that they can work together, significant funding will follow. Far more funding than if small differences prevent us from working together. To get this, we need proper leadership, properly representing us to negotiate funding with government, not just mayors walking away from difficult negotiations. That includes Tim Bowles, who has been conspicuously silent in this debate, and Marvin, acting on behalf of our city and our region. Like Marvin Rees, we want what's right for Bristol, working cross-boundary, cross-party to sort out housing, transport and the climate emergency. And as Eleanor has said, we would like the essential consultation for North Somerset to join to go ahead at the same time as the talks with ministers in government about funding. And unsurprisingly, we want a better deal from government with more money so that Bristolians don't lose out. In summary, we need to act as a region to address the challenges that we face. We need to face the challenge of an economy that's been devastated by COVID, the challenge of Brexit, and the challenge of a climate emergency. To do that, people will need to work together across our region to build a green recovery with green jobs, green transport, and the building of new green homes. To help to do this, I ask you to support the amended motion.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor Negus to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Once again, this Bristol Mayor has overturned a decision by this council following a poor decision made in 2016, which at least at that stage had a majority party behind it rather than a single vote. We're in the position where we are in the hands of one person making one decision for one person and one party. And that's not the way this council should be working. It's not intended to work that way. And I'm therefore very, very disappointed with the amendment that's before us at the moment. I don't know what the government's financial offer would have been when North Somerset were to join. I'd have been very interested to find out, and if I were on that team, I would have been in the room fighting to make sure it was as good as it could possibly be. But we'll never know, of course, because the veto to this deal of letting in North Somerset was actually done before the deal was put on the table to be discussed. And this is why I have so much trouble with this mayor. He wants to make his own decisions rather than being in the room trying to put the arguments to get the right decisions made in a collegiate and a cooperative way. This is what happened with the West of England organisation before. Tim Kent and I were both representatives of Bristol as cabinet members at that stage. We worked with across all parties. Some of it was pretty hard knocks, but we actually managed to find a way through and get the best answers for all of us. That is no longer happening. And the system has broken down as a result of that. Now, that may be because of factors outside Councillor Rees's control. It may be because it's being badly led. I'm perhaps not going to comment on that at the moment. It could be a very good deal better. But you've got to be in the room and fighting and making sure that you put your point rather than stomping off and just saying you're not having anything to do with a decision that you just choose not to like. That's not the way forward. And that's why I'm very disappointed with this amendment and with the Greens response, what looks like the Greens response to it. It's a poor show. We could have done better than this because it's now eliminated our opportunity to have that last chance at making this right. It's cut the rope that's tying us to the possibility
Councillor, you
of
have
getting
20
up the hill.
seconds left. Thank
Thank
you.
you. I'm very concerned about the way this is going. And I'm going to say that what we're looking at here is somebody who is trying to hold on to power, to try and hold on to the way he prefers to do things, rather than get in there and bat for all of us. We need to work much more collegially here. We've got around this chamber people that
Can
will
you draw
do
to a
that,
close now,
but it's
please?
being blocked. So please, please, I want you to vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Mead to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. North Somerset has an independent leader with a rainbow cabinet, and that shows to me that there's a willingness to work cross-party for the good of North Somerset residents. And it bodes well for their desire to work across local authority boundaries for the future good of a combined and enlarged WECA. There is a danger, and Mayor Rees is quite right to think that there are dangers in whichever decision is taken. But the biggest danger for me is that if we don't start working together now, government can and will use that as an excuse to deny us additional future funding. They will think that we're a group of local authorities who squabble among ourselves like children and don't deserve to be treated like adults with decent money coming in for the local communities. But equally, we could find ourselves like Manchester. Manchester has played ball every step of the way and been absolutely royally stuffed by central government when it came to COVID funding. My issue is not with North Somerset. I trust them. I just don't trust our national government in Westminster. But we have a lot of issues that cross borders as well. Rural communities are suffering very real poverty, every bit as real as the kind of poverty we see in places like Lawrence Hill. And the RSA recently showed that there are farmers having to use food banks because they can't afford to buy the food that they've produced when it's been turned into sausages and cereals and sold through supermarkets. By enlarging the region and by working together, I think we could actually help rural economies, rural communities, as well as our city community. And of course, we need to be working together on things like housing and transport infrastructure. And whether or not North Somerset ends up being able to join WECA at this time, I think it would be also worth bearing in mind that we wouldn't wish to make of ourselves an unnecessary enemy on our own doorstep that we would have to work with in the future. Ultimately, the people in Bristol and across WECA want us all to put aside any differences of opinion to do with political parties or local authority boundaries and work together collectively, sharing our best experience and our best people to work together for the good of the region as a whole. Now, if you look historically, Bristol, north of the river, was part of Gloucestershire. South of the river, it's part of Somerset. It's always been at the heart of the region.
You have 20 seconds left,
Let's
Councillor.
put Bristol at the heart of an enlarged WECA, and let's work collectively to get that deal that we all of us want and will benefit from.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. It's a very interesting tactic, this discussion. We can talk about how we want North Somerset to join, but then we put the bar so unrealistically high that it'll never ever be met and expansion will never appear. So the Mayor was talking about the financial things that he wanted earlier, and then he listed a load of things, a price tag that runs into billions and billions and billions. The underground alone was touched on, Western Harbour, all of this. That level of money is not there right now. And I don't think the behaviour is going to enamor itself with the Treasury to release that level of funding. The financial discussions, it's quite straightforward. You need an in-principle consultation on should, in principle, North Somerset join. We all think it should. And once that consultation is launched, then the financial settlement discussions follow. Then at the end of that, it all comes together. We'll know on the principle to join, and we'll know the financial package. And then we make an informed decision. What the amended motion does is kick this into the long grass. The government think that we squabble amongst ourselves as local authorities. and this reinforces that. So you may have decided or put forward the idea that this will all work out, it's all good, we want North Somerset to join, but the bar you've set is too high. That's not, that level of money isn't there. I actually thought the underground was going to come from private investment, but that seems to have changed recently. So we now have a problem. We're not going to support the amendment because it's so diluted it that what we hoped would be a good reservoir, a lake of support, is now more like a puddle. And I'm afraid this is it's shameful. I think we could have done better. I think we've actually let people down. And I have to say, when everyone else is saying that there's a problem and you're saying, oh, but it's not me, and they're all pointing at you, I think it's time to look in the mirror. I think Bristol is being very badly led on this issue. We're not going to support it. We wish North Somerset would join. It makes sense. But I fear at this rate, they will be looking at the Somerset Authority rather than us. I wouldn't be surprised if some other authorities join with it, because I think Bristol has proved it's not willing to play ball and nicely with its neighbours. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Denyer to speak on behalf of the Green Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In 2016, Bristol Green Party councillors voted for the devolution deal, like other councillors, because despite its flaws, it was clear that cooperation is essential. And besides, this was the only game in town, the only way for Bristol to get more funding from national government. In 2020, our feelings are similar. We can't have good regional transport or housing without local authorities working together. So we need North Somerset in WECA. But we still have concerns, and it's clear we're not the only ones. Mayor Rees has told us that he's worried about Bristol only having a quarter of the vote share for much more than a quarter of the population, worried that this hands power disproportionately to the Conservatives, which is of course something we are worried about too, worried that unless government guarantees us a better funding deal, then as was said earlier, it spreads the jam more thinly, meaning that there's less for Bristol, and uncomfortable starting a consultation on a deal where we don't know what the funding situation is. And I agree with the Mayor on all of those. And I'm extremely disappointed with our Conservative Metro Mayor, Tim Bowles, who has failed, frankly, to represent any of us with government. As others have said, look at Greater Manchester. They have new houses, improving transport, and have negotiated many more rounds of devolved powers and funding. What do we have? A lacklustre Metro Mayor who has had no impact. But even though I share Mayor Rees's concerns, I don't agree entirely with the way he's addressed them so far. Why veto the deal now by refusing to consult, preventing any possibility of a solution, when you could have proceeded to a consultation while keeping the right to veto later if funding and other issues aren't sorted out? Why didn't you take it to WECA scrutiny or to Bristol councillors for input? We would have backed your negotiation position on funding and on proportional representation, as it were. And why aren't you willing to run the consultation in parallel with funding negotiations? I understand it's not ideal, but we've had plenty of other Bristol consultations that have given several different options. So why couldn't the consultation do that? Chances are most people would only vote for it if it had decent funding attached. So that would even help strengthen your negotiating hand. So for all of those reasons, Green councillors are supporting this motion and are also specifically calling for a consultation to open now or as soon as possible in parallel with funding negotiations. And I want the Mayor to know that if he opens the consultation and continues negotiations in good faith, we will support him in his calls for better funding and proportional representation in the region.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor Kent to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be shorter than 3 minutes. I mean, let's be clear. As it's amended, this motion is just worthless. I mean, we expected this from the Labour members. They just do as they're told. No wonder so many are desperate to stand down. But Green councillors today have demonstrated they're more interested in being Marvin's little helpers than standing up for our city and our residents. I was brought up on the coast, And let me assure you, I've met jellyfish with more backbone than Green councillors tonight. The deadline was clear. There was very little wriggle room. That wriggle room you just threw out. To start saying now about the consultation, you just voted to delete the consultation. You just voted to delete the fact that the mayor had a veto all along, right through the process. You voted to delete that. So don't go giving us speeches now about what you think. We saw what you thought when you voted. So you deleted the request to meet the final deadline. That was clear. You just blocked the request to publish the in principle consultation. The one thing government told us we had to do to be able to get to the financial negotiations. We might not have liked that. Sure, we'd love to see them put the money down on the table first, but they didn't. They told us what we had to do. We just had to publish a very small consultation on the principle of North Somerset joining. You voted that down. That was your choice. Don't whinge now. What's left is just a pointless stringing together of words. Mayor Rees, having wrecked the finances of Bristol, losing £50 million on Bristol Energy, 12 million on the arena, another 12 million on the failed leap, millions more on getting rid of senior officers with payoffs and then replacing them with overpriced consultants. Having done all that, he's now moved on to WECA. Great, wrecked Bristol. Let's now wreck WECA. You have one chance. It's gone. It really doesn't matter how you vote now because it's just pointless words. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Mayor Rees. Would you like to speak to the motion? You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Lots to say. Well, I won't get it away. But look, first off, obviously there's lots of passion about just how important this is to the Bristol economy. 2 points on what Councillor Gollop said earlier on. One is, if it was so important to Bristol, why did you not say anything to your Conservative colleague when they decided not to come in the first instance? Secondly, you are a finance lead. You do not want to know what the finances is, which I find quite remarkable. Councillor Weston, the estate agent image is an interesting one, but you're in a situation where the estate agent won't meet you, won't talk about the price, won't even show you the house. So it's not standing up. We have no sighting on what's going on. On the Liberal Democrats, actually, we just looked at the voting record from the initial Combined Authority, and we found a number of people actually abstained on the original WECA vote, unless I'm getting it wrong. Abstentions: Councillor Negus, Hopkins, Kent, Campion-Smith, Clark, and Chris. So it's quite interesting, all this passion for joined up working. Now, I've got the record in front of me from the June vote. So have a look at it. You abstained first time out, which is quite remarkable in light of the passion to joint work. And I know I love hearing from Councillor Hopkins always about how important it is to be able to build cross-party working relationships. So I look forward to more on that. Look, and I do appreciate you can have a crack at the Greens all you want, but what we've had here are conversations where people have actually been able to think, not get involved in truisms, but actually say, let's lift the bonnet and see let's see what's under it. Let's see how this works. Let's look at some of the small print. It's not easy politics. The easy politics, just like the arena, is to jump on it and say, let's get it done. When you lift the bonnet, you find out it doesn't actually work. There's all sorts of dangers ahead. But, it's worth reflecting on your previous abstentions. Look, there's a lot of risk for Bristol people, if you're frank about it. I've not heard any of the coalition speeches reference any of the concerns we've raised about future dilution of Bristol's sovereignty, the risks to Bristol funding, and the governance arrangements around how investment decisions are made. Not one addressment, just a repeated statement that working together is good. We all agree with that, which is why we have been repeatedly pointing out the challenges with governance and why we were explicitly clear with the Combined Authority and North Somerset about
you have 20 seconds left.
You talk about the squabbling in public. Again, my point is we raised these issues in the dressing room behind closed doors. We did not put this disagreement in the public domain. That was done by our neighbours and by some of the people on this call who went to the press and said, hey, we're having a big bust up. Manchester, Greater Manchester, they do their disagreements behind closed doors. When you come out public, you're united. That is the way we sought to approach this. It's not the way
If you could
it was
draw to
given
a close now, please. Thank
so
you.
now it's in the public domain. But this is about looking out for the interests of Bristol people and making sure that we have access to the investment that we need to deliver that green, inclusive recovery.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor Hopkins. Would you like to respond to the debate on the amended motion as the mover of the substantive motion? You have 3 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, not surprised by the Labour members following orders, but the naivety of Green Party members is just quite staggering. I'm afraid that we're dealing with a mayor here who says one thing and does exactly the opposite on so many occasions. And thank you to Jeff Gollop for actually mentioning Jubilee Pool, because the parallels, although it's a much smaller issue, are very, very clear. Basically saying one thing, doing completely another. He's let the clock run down on this opportunity for month after month after month, and it was only exposed by the other authorities crying foul. They didn't have any other choice because we weren't alerted to the situation. Did anything come to our scrutiny? Were we told there's a problem? The central government won't negotiate in advance? No, we didn't get any of that at all. There was arguing behind the scenes, and basically the other authorities, and these are not a bunch of Tory authorities. There's an independent, there's a Lib Dem, there's a Tory, all three of them saying exactly the same thing. This man is causing the trouble. This man will not work with his neighbours. And I heard it not just from the mayor today, I heard it from other members of the party as well. And quite frankly, Trumpian politics are not what we need in Bristol. It's easy enough to withdraw from the World Health Organization and from climate accord changes. Yes, you save a few pounds in the short term by doing that, but bluntly, you've got to be a grown-up. You've got to learn to work together. And I'm afraid this mayor that we've actually got has just demonstrated how he refuses to do that. And more fool you to the Greens for actually believing the nonsense he's been spouting. We've heard that he wants to bring North Somerset in. Let's see it happen. He's got the power to actually make this happen. He is the mayor who says that we need to bring in North Somerset. Let's see it actually happen. And let's see the extra huge amounts of money coming in that he's actually pretending he can get. Well, let's have a look, shall we? Because the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And we've seen the disaster in Bristol over the last few years. And I'm afraid now he's extending his wrecking policies
Your 20
to the
seconds
surrounding
left, Councillor.
authorities as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That draws to a close the debate. We will now move to a vote. This will be done in the form of a roll call. You will be now voting on the motion on the table, and the names will be read out in alphabetical order. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Abraham?
No vote.
Councillor Don Alexander?
For.
Councillor Leslie Alexander?
No vote.
Excuse me, can I just check? Does a no vote mean you're abstaining, Councillor Abraham and Councillor Alexander?
That is the term that we've always used if we're abstaining.
We're just
No
using
vote.
it for clarity. I don't want any confusion. So if we put up on the board that you've abstained, are you happy with that?
If that's the new term we're using now, it's always been for 50 years, no vote.
Okay. Are you happy that we've put you abstained?
Yeah,
Councillor? Thank
anything
you very
that
much
puts me in
indeed.
that right column.
Okay, and Councillor Alexander, are you happy that we write on the board that you've abstained?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Beach?
For.
Councillor Bradshaw?
For.
Councillor Brain?
For.
Councillor Bolton?
For.
Councillor Brooke?
Councillor Brooks had to leave, so can we put his apologies, please? I do apologise. I should have told the Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Breckles.
For.
Councillor Carey.
Against.
Councillor Cheney.
For.
Councillor Barry Clark.
For.
Councillor Stephen Clark. Councillor Stephen Clark. Councillor Clough.
Abstain.
Councillor Comley.
For.
Councillor Craig.
For.
Councillor Chris Davies.
Abstain.
Councillor Mike Davies. Councillor Mike Davies. Councillor Denyer.
Oh, sorry, I'm for.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Denyer.
For.
Councillor Dudd.
For.
Councillor Eddy.
No vote.
Councillor Fodor.
For.
Councillor Godwin.
For.
Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Gollop.
No vote.
Councillor Goulandris.
Abstain.
Councillor Hance.
For.
Councillor Hickman. Councillor
For.
Hickman. Thank you. Councillor Hiscott.
For.
Councillor Holland.
No, excuse me, that was not my voice. No vote.
Thank you, Councillor Hiscott. Councillor Holland.
For.
Councillor Hopkins.
Abstain.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Jammer.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Jones.
No vote.
Councillor Keane.
For.
Councillor Kent. Councillor Kent. Councillor Kirk.
For.
Councillor Lake.
For.
Councillor Lovell.
For.
Councillor Massey.
For.
Councillor Mead.
For.
Councillor Mullalias.
Abstain.
Councillor Morris.
Abstain.
Councillor Negus.
Against.
Councillor O'Rourke.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Phipps.
For.
Councillor Pickersgill.
For.
Councillor Quarterly.
Abstain.
Councillor Radford.
Abstain.
Councillor Rippington.
For.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Shah.
For.
Councillor Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Threlfall.
For.
Councillor Tinknell.
For.
Councillor Wellington.
For.
Councillor Weston.
Abstain.
Councillor Whittle.
For.
About 2 more minutes.
Councillor Windows.
Against.
Councillor Wright.
Abstain.
Mayor Rees.
For.
We go back up, please, Sam.
We'll go back up to the top now and pick up any that we've left out.
I'm very sorry. I should have given apologies for Councillor Clark. He had to leave early for another meeting.
That's all, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have the results are in. So we have 42 for, 3 against, 17 abstentions, and 5 apologies. So the amended motion is carried. That concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you to all councillors and to all others for attending this evening's meeting. The next meeting of full council will be held on the 8th of December 2020, starting